Clock at 10. Adams the off balance.
Oh my goodness!
Alrighty guys, and welcome back to the Basketball Fix podcast. Now we're continuing on with day number 5 of the NBL Free Agency Fix, and today's episode is based around the former NBL champions, or the current NBL champions. When we look at it all right now, they're holding that title for a couple more days, but we're going to be breaking down the Tasmania JackJumpers with Tasmanian Takeover co-host JD. JD, mate, how are you, and welcome to the Free Agency Fix.
Thanks, mate. I'm excited for this one. I feel like I've been promoted from my little island podcast and made it onto the big mainland podcast. I feel like when I moved to the mainland, I moved into the big city. I feel like I've made it. This is excellent.
I'm looking forward to it, mate. We've obviously been in contact, and we've just tried to record this off air before. We had a couple of technical difficulties, mate. But I'm looking forward to obviously breaking down the Tasmania JackJumpers, the season that was, I guess, and sort of break down the roster construction going into NBL 26 as well. It seems to be a very exciting time for the JackJumpers from things that I've been told personally, obviously things that I'm seeing online and everything like that as well. So I'm looking forward to getting your thoughts on it, mate, because it's a team that's close to your heart. You're a former Taswegian yourself, mate, and I'm sure you're super pumped and excited heading into a fresh NBL 26 season. But give the podcast a bit of a shout, mate. What are you guys doing over there? What have you just uploaded most recently? And give the socials a plug as well.
Yeah, mate. Myself and Birdo get together every week and talk shit about the JackJumpers. We like to have a bit of a muck around and a joke, and it gets a bit rowdy every now and then. But we've just finished reviewing every single player on the JackJumpers roster. It turned into a two-parter because we had so much to talk about. So that one's a really interesting. If you want a bit more of an in-depth understanding of my headspace, you can head over there and hear Birdo yell at me for having the wrong opinions.
Love it. I think it's one of those things. Sorry, a little voice break there, mate. It's early in the morning, but it's one of those things, I guess, over there with what you guys are starting to produce. Obviously, you're a part of the Basketball Fix family, but the show in which you guys have started and you guys are getting through. I remember we had a conversation, and I sort of said, I was like, I want this to be Tasmania JackJumpers basketball related, and that's it. And then you guys come out and you said, how about we make it about the Tassie community? And I loved it. I was like, go for it. And, you guys speak a bit of basketball. You guys speak a bit of footy. You guys speak a bit about the Sydney to Hobart a few months ago as well. Anything Tasmania related, the Tasmanian Takeover is your spot. So if you're a huge fan, you love the Tasmanian JackJumpers and you love the Tasmanian community, I know there's a lot of you guys out there, make sure you go and check out the Tasmanian Takeover as well. But JD, mate, let's get into today's episode. NBL 25 was a bit of an up and down one for the Jackies, mate. I'd love to hear a quick little season review and some of your thoughts, and obviously some of your thoughts on the roster as well.
Yeah, look, it's it's hard to complain about missing the finals when you've made finals 75% of the time you've been in the league. So I think all Tasmanians knew that we were probably due to miss finals eventually. So we've been spoiled a bit over the last 4 years. Look, I don't think this season went particularly exactly how we planned. We were cruelled by injuries at terrible times to key personnel. The loss of Will Magnay early, the loss of Shawnee Mack twice during the season was not good. And then for Majuk Deng to miss a couple of games towards the end of the season when we're already riddled with injury and illness at that time was not ideal. So to only miss finals by percentage after facing all of that adversity was, I think, impressive. And you can't be disheartened because there's so much potential for us to be right there again next year.
I think you're bang on, mate. Like, I look at the organisation as a whole. Obviously, they're such a strong organisation. And then You lose Jack McVeigh off the top, which you didn't mention there either. That's the biggest loss, I think, for this NBL season. But then you lose Shawnee McDonald in a pre-season tournament just a couple of weeks before round number 1. Like, if it couldn't get any worse, you've probably lost your most important player in Jack McVeigh and then your best, most up-and-coming player in Sean McDonald. And we got to see the importance of him come, when he returned from injury for that 7 or 8 game stretch there where they were just unstoppable. But you speak about Will Magnay, you speak about Majuk Deng, those sort of guys who went down with injury late. It was just so unfortunate because it felt like, I guess as a neutral sort of follower of the JackJumpers to a certain degree and someone who covers the league, it did seem like every time you guys got rolling, something would chop it down. And then you got rolling again, something would chop it down. And it was just that constant cycle. You'd see 2 poor games, 5 good games, injury. Same thing, injury. Same thing, injury. And you just sat there going, they just can't seem to get a fair run of it. But there was one non-injury related sort of piece of controversial sort of stuff that came out of the NBL 25 season for the Tasmania JackJumpers. And that was the Sword Hummer situation, mate. Obviously, where Craig Sword was released from the JackJumpers. And obviously, Ian Hummer was brought into the team as well to replace, it seemed to be like the rebounding and the scoring that they were losing from Jack McVeigh. Well, Hummer did none of that, to be fair. He barely even saw court minutes. Couldn't even hit free throws and couldn't do anything. What did you make of the Sword-Hummer swap at that midpoint of the season?
It's an interesting one. I really feel for Craig Sword, and I really enjoyed your interview you did with the great man because it shed so much light on what actually was going on behind the scenes. He was a victim to Will Magnay's injury, I think. I think we decided that we needed a bit more height and a bit more defense in the paint, if that's how you put it, which is what we expected Ian to bring. And it probably didn't play out like that in the end. In the end, we just sort of recruited a worse Fabian Krislovic, I would say, in the end, who he was as a Jack Jumper, we all loved him, but performance-wise, you kind of expect a little bit more from your imports, I think. And I just feel like Craig just wasn't given a go to show us exactly what he had. Yeah,
that's the thing, eh? Like, you bang on. Like, we got to see, I guess, Craig after he left the JackJumpers. And I know he went to a lower sort of ranked league, essentially, when we look at it. But he had multiple 30-point games. He had multiple 25-point games. Like, it wasn't like he can't produce. I just don't think Scott Roth thought he was the right player. I think Scott had his idea of what this roster was going to look like with Jack McVeigh and Shawnee McDonald and everything like that, everyone in the lineup, and thought... Craig's the perfect complement piece to that sort of lineup and the way they wanted to play. Well, everything gets thrown on its head, and essentially within a matter of minutes, Craig's gone, Ian's in a week later, Shawnee Mac goes down, Will goes down, Majuk goes down. I think realistically they missed the boat a little bit here. In hindsight's a wonderful thing. Us sitting right here deconstructing that sort of move, I reckon if they kept Craig Sword, they may not have still made the finals, but I feel like they would have had a nice little chance because he probably gets a bit more of a chance to score like we've seen him in other professional leagues and doing those things in which he knows he's capable of, which is what we spoke about on that interview that you mentioned there earlier, mate. So it's a disappointing one for sure, mate, but to just miss out on the playoffs after all of that turbulence as well, I guess, is really great. One question I want to quickly ask you here, mate. Do you feel like the club, when you speak to the club a little bit, and I did a few interviews with the players and everything like that, I feel like the club feels like people have attacked the sort of persona of the close-knitness and the family sort of environment of the Tasmania JackJumpers. Do you see that, or do you feel that at all with somebody who covers the team?
I think one thing I probably wanted to talk about is when the JackJumpers recruit, they're not just recruiting players. It's easy for a Sydney Kings or a Melbourne United to go out and just grab the best basketballer that's available. There's so much more to consider with Tasmania. Tasmanians a lot of the time feel like they've been ignored and neglected and downtrodden for decades and decades, probably starting with when the NBL decided to get rid of the Hobart Devils. So when the recruiters at the JackJumpers have a big job because Tasmania sees the JackJumpers as their reward for years and years and years of being downtrodden and ignored, right? So when you come to the JackJumpers, you kind of have to have that mentality, is that I have to reward the community for what they've been through, and I need to go out and get into schools, and I need to shake hands and kiss babies and sign autographs, and if you're not willing to do that, then it's just not going to work at the JackJumpers. So that reduces your recruiting pool even more than it probably would be with a team that's got maybe a limited budget. So yeah.
It's a great way of looking at it, because we don't often mention it, and it's this to a certain degree with all the other teams barring Perth, Melbourne and Sydney, you could say, where we can't just necessarily go and throw $1 million out at one player and expect to have a decent roster, because some owners and some franchises can't go into that soft cap too much, like obviously teams like the JackJumpers to a certain degree, maybe the Cairns Taipans, definitely the Illawarra Hawks, potentially obviously the Adelaide 36ers, all those other teams as well. So there is some sort of a disadvantage when we do look at it. But let's jump into the contracted players, mate. We'll briefly go through this, obviously, because we know who's coming back, and that's exciting. But who are a couple of the big names in which you want to mention briefly, and who you're looking forward to seeing in NBL 26?
Yeah, there's lots of flexibility in the JackJumpers roster at the moment. We've signed 4 players: Will Magnay, Sean McDonald, Anthony Druick, and Majuk Deng, and that's a championship-winning local lineup, if ever I've seen one. We need to promote Walter Brown to the roster this year. He signed a 2-year development player roster with a 3rd year on the roster. Be interesting to see what they do with Walter, because he had a few opportunities this year and probably didn't perform as well as he would have liked. So he's going to have something to prove, and he's going to have some big expectations on him this year. But the key pillars in Will Magnay, Sean McDonald, Anthony Drimmick, and Majuk Deng gives us a really solid foundation to build on, I think.
Yeah, I think you're bang on, mate. And it's for a number of reasons as well. It's not just the on-the-court stuff, it's the off-the-court stuff as well, in which, guys like Shawnee Mack, obviously Will, Majuk and Drimmick can bring in. We look at, let's just go in and break them down in particular. You've got Majuk and Drimmick, who have been around the league for a number of years now. They are savvy veteran players. You can go a little bit further with Will Magnay. He's obviously had that NBA experience, and he's been to the next level. He's had the international experience as well and everything like that. And then you've got Shawnee Mack, who has just had the perfect apprenticeship. The 4-year apprenticeship under guys like Clint Steindl and guys like obviously Scott Roth. He's one of those foundational members of the Tasmania JackJumpers, and every time he speaks, he oozes of pride, and you can just see so much going on with Shawnee Mack in terms of on the court and off the court as well. So you bang on, mate. Like, realistically, if you were to have a team to already start to build around with Shawnee at the point guard, Drimmick at the 2, you're obviously missing a small forward. We can throw Walter Brown there at a small forward, Majuk Deng at the 4, and obviously Will Magnay at the 5. It's a pretty solid little start to build around, essentially. And obviously you've got Archie as well, re-signed obviously last year on a 2-year contract as well. He's going to be exciting, backing up obviously Will Magnay over the next couple of years. You see every time he gets a bit of a chance to play, he looks exciting. So I'm loving the construction of the roster. It just seems like that hard man working team that Scott Roth and the organisation are going for every single year. And now they get to have some fun. They've got their core already built in terms of everything, and now it's time to expand. But let's get into some of these uncontracted players, mate. And this is where it gets a little bit difficult, because coming out of contract, you've got a couple of obviously former stars of the team. You've got championship players. Mate, I know you're sad. I'm kind of sad when I look at this, because I don't really think we're going to see too many of these guys potentially back in the JackJumpers colours next year.
Yeah, it is sad to read your free agency tracker and see the potential outs, starting with potentially Jordan Crawford and Milton Doyle, who are absolute superstars in Tasmania. They are, think of any celebrity you like as far as Tasmanian celebrities go. Milton Doyle and Jordan Crawford are just revered. And I always go back to that interview that Jordan Crawford did after the Teal round against Cairns, where the commentator asked him, "Hey, this potentially could be your last game in JackJumpers colours. How do you feel?" And he choked up and he broke down a little bit. And the phrase he used was "Tasmania's home." The community have just embraced us, and Tasmania's home. And to think about not coming back is heartbreaking, and so many Tasmanians can relate to that. So it's I'm devastated that Jordan Teapot Crawford, I call him Teapot because he's short and stout. I'm devastated that he won't be back. And Milton Doyle effectively won us a championship. He was, without a doubt, our most consistent player in last year's championship season. There were games he won off his own bat. There's so much excitement that surrounds Milton. But he did have, you look at his numbers and they were pretty much identical to last year, but the impact that he had on games just wasn't there this year. So I would welcome back both of our imports with open arms, but I think the JackJumpers are probably going to look to go down a different route next year.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about Milton, because obviously when we saw Jack McVeigh getting released from the team, I think most people's first initial thoughts were, wow, exciting, Milton's going to step up into that role, average 20 points per game. That was the general consensus from everyone around the league. And you mentioned his numbers there. So the season before, he averaged more points. He also averaged more assists, and he also averaged more rebounds. So his production across the board went down, and one thing that went up was his turnovers per game, because the ball was in his hands more, and I just don't think he was ready to obviously have that everything going on. So he averaged 3.2 turnovers per game. So I guess the question here, which I want to ask, is if Milton isn't to return next season, is he a bigger loss than a Jordan Crawford? Or like, who do you see as the more important fit for the JackJumpers going forward?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot more point guards running around, dominating leagues than there are potentially guys that can slow down play. When I watch Milton, I'm reminded of Scott Pendlebury, who you may or may not know has a basketball background. He's just got this ability to slow down time, and he's got this amazing vision, and he can make these passes that you go, where the hell did that come from? As opposed to Jordan Crawford, who is just pure tenacity. He's just flat out all the time, I will score. So, I mean, together they're a great combination, but I think that the role that Jordan played is probably easier to replace than the one that Milton has provided for the last 3 years.
And I think as well, from a JackJumpers perspective, and we're speaking to the fans right now, we can't forget, that Jordan is 34 years of age and Milton Doyle is 31. Yeah. So we can't continually have probably two of these guys getting to the back end of their career on your team and expect the team to be playing fast offense and fast basketball and winning games of, at a high level and everything like that. So I think at the end of the day, as sad as it is, obviously, to see these two guys potentially go, I'm not sure it's the worst decision going forward for the team, because I want to get your thoughts. I sat down with Darren Smith, the COO of the Tasmania JackJumpers, and he said a couple of interesting things to me. And, you're sort of speaking as the man of the people right now, mate, the man of the JackJumpers community. But when you hear the words wanting to get younger and more athletic, what does that do to you as a supporter? Does it get you excited?
It does. What I liked about that interview, I'm a bit of a fan of yours, Josh. I listen to all your content. What I liked about that, he talked about the big three, the Sydney Kings, the Melbourne United, and the Perth Wildcats. And he talked about becoming the big four, and the JackJumpers just becoming this dynasty team that just performs year in and year out. And as a supporter, that's what it's all about. For 25 years, we had nothing to support, right? Yeah. So the thought that we've got a dominant team in an elite league in Australia, that's got to get everyone excited. And unfortunately, to do that, you've got to invest in the future, and having like your 30-plus-year-olds on the roster is probably not as viable long term as having some elite 24, 25-year-olds.
Yeah, no, definitely, mate. Now, obviously, a couple of more names here, which I want to get your thoughts on briefly, who are out of contract coming into NBL 26. You've got Fabian Krislovic, you've got Ruben Tarangi, your guy, you've got Nick Stoddart, and you've got Lockie Barker. Out of those four guys, I'm just going to put you on the spot here. I want you to pick two in which you're happy to bring back and two you're happy to let go.
I think a priority. I think you've got to reward good form, especially in Tasmania. To see a pathway to the NBL is really important. So my number one priority would be bringing back Nick Stoddart. He was everything we needed when we needed him last year, and I think it's good to show the community that if you perform your role and you do your job, there is a pathway from the NBL 1 to the NBL. And he was just outstanding. I can't speak more highly of Nick and what he did during the year. And then probably for cultural reasons, I'd bring back the OG in Fabian Krislovic. He's been asked to do jobs that he has no right to be doing since he's been with the JackJumpers. That he's just the guy that Scott Roth goes, "Hey Fabs, we need you to do this. Go and do it," and he just goes and does it. He's the ultimate glue guy. He's the ultimate plug when we need a fix. So those are the two I'd be bringing back. It's a shame because Ruben, my man, the terror.
I was about to say
he was everything. No one expected him to be as good as he was. He was picked up off the scrap heap at the end of the year. He didn't have anyone seeking out his contract. And we gave him a chance, and he paid us back in spades. So, it'd be a shame for Ruben to be playing somewhere else. But as far as team dynamics, I think Fabs probably gets the chocolates.
Yeah, I love the Nick Stoddart comments there, mate. I think he's going to fall a bit of a victim to Shawnee McDonald, to be fair, though. That's my only worry for Nick. I think, I think all the JackJumper supporters have seen how great Sean's become over a 4-year stretch, and he's turning into a player which is a genuine starter and star in the league. And I think he's going to fall somewhat victim to that as his career goes on, in particular with the JackJumpers. So it's going to be hard, mate, but the captain, it's a tough one. Who leads his team going forward?
Yeah, this one's a really interesting one, and I had to think about it overnight as to who I would pick as my captain. And I've come up with 3 names, all for different reasons, and it's really up to the JackJumpers to see which way they want to go as far as the captaincy goes. I think if you want someone to come in and drive standards, I would be giving it to Anthony Drimmick, who's just the ultimate team guy. He comes in and just does the jobs that no one wants to do. He's the one getting copping elbows in the back of the head from Rob Lowe. You know what I mean? He's the ultimate pest, but the ultimate team man. I think if you want to drive team culture, you probably reward Fabian Krislovic for what he's provided over the last 4 years. This will be our 5th year. He's been there from the start, and Scott Roth has openly said he got in for cultural reasons. He's a bit like Jared Bairstow, may not be the most talented player on the floor, but he bleeds green and gold. You know what I mean? He's the ultimate JackJumper. You just got to hear him speak on his own podcast. If we want to really focus on the community aspect, you give it to Majuk Deng, who may as well be a teacher. He spends that much time in schools, and hence he won the community award at the MVP awards. So there's a couple of different routes. My heart says I'd give it to Anthony Drimmick, but I think that we're blessed with options, to be honest, which is great.
Yeah, these surprise me, to be fair, mate. Like, I have someone who I think is just the perfect replacement for Clint Steinel, and it's the guy I was just speaking about. Sorry, I had something in my throat, obviously, before I threw to you there. I couldn't really get everything out that I wanted to say, but Shawnee Mack's the guy I look at to be the leader of this team. And I think you can, I don't necessarily believe it's burdening a young guy, but you can burden a guy like Shawnee McDonald because he's basically been mentored by, I believe, the best captain in the NBL outside of, I think it's him and Jesse Wagstaff, and I'm speaking of Clint Steindl and Jesse Wagstaff. Like, those two guys are, when I look at longevity, when I look at careers, when I look at the way they lead and everything like that, that's a leader when it comes to basketball. Now, I think Shawnee has a lot of the same standards that obviously Clint does. Reserved character, good basketball player, and doesn't really toe the line too much. Now, and Anthony Drimmick, I love it, and I love the way you bring it up. The standards, 100%. He's a hard-nosed player. Sometimes, though, he can tinker with the edge of sort of going over the edge with some things as well, whether it's physically or mentally, anything like that. So that's the only way I sort of deviate away from an Anthony Drimmick. Fabian Krislovic, 100%. You can see that, the culture guy. Majuk Deng as well, 100%. I believe, personally, it's down to Will Magnay and Shawnee Mack for me. And sometimes you've got to have a guy in which, you know, like Will Magnay, for example, he seems to be a guy who, from the outside, he looks like he's very quiet, but when you actually see a lot of the film and you see a lot of the videos, he's very loud. He has great conversations with all the players, in particular the young guys as well. So this is the $1 million question, and it's such a shame, obviously, the fact that they've lost Clint Steindl, and you know, I just think it's a disappointing thing for the JackJumpers because I think he was a foundational member. I believe he left the Perth Wildcats to go over with Scott Roth as well to set the culture and the tone with obviously Scott, Jacob Chance, and Mika Vicona as well, and he's been a foundational father, I guess you guys could call him as well. But I love those options, mate. It's going to be interesting as well. But who's one guy, mate, off the top of your head, that you'd love to see join the JackJumpers, potentially from another team? You may have seen some rumours out there. Give us something to get the fans excited, potentially, for going into NBL 26.
This one's going to be a bit left field. We've only ever had one Tasmanian in the team, which is help me out here, Sam. Sam. He's now with the Brisbane Bullets.
Sam McDaniel.
Sam McDaniel. He's our only Tasmanian that's ever had a roster spot at the JackJumpers. I have heard some rumours we're in some pretty deep talks with a guy who's playing college basketball with a team called Louisiana. His name's Rain Smith, and he is breaking all sorts of three-point records over there in US college basketball. And he's a boy from Ulverston, which is a small country town up in the northwest. So it's a bit left field. I think everyone would expect me to talk about Josh Bannon and what's going on with my names today?
Taron Armstrong.
Taron Armstrong. But the one that really excites me is Rain Smith, because he's like if Jordan Crawford and Majet had a baby. He'd be outstanding.
Well, I've just searched him up, mate, and unfortunately this afternoon he's just rolled his ankle in the March Madness stuff for Louisiana, so he's gone down with injury. We'll call it the JD curse, mate. We'll start that going as well. That's an interesting name to keep a bit of an eye on. We have seen him obviously floating around in a few of these little rumours here and there. I haven't heard him linked to the JackJumpers. That's an exciting one for me there, mate. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've got a few rumours here which I'll just rattle off quickly from a Tasmanian JackJumpers perspective to get you all excited quickly. We're going to have another episode with Clint Bertison from the Tasmanian Takeover as well. But a couple of big names, obviously Matthew Dellavedova's looking for some more money and a bigger deal. He may be a guy you guys can go after. Obviously, there's the Josh Bannon, Taron Armstrong sort of rumours going around as well. And a couple of ones from players potentially leaving. Milton Doyle may be signing for Melbourne United, which would be just an absolute shocker for, I guess, Tasmanian fans as well. But if he wants to stick around in the NBL, that may be the best option for him. But JD, mate, thank you very much for coming on today's show. It's been an absolute honour, obviously, having you on for your first episode on the, as you call it, the big time show over here, which is still just festering away, mate. But obviously, like I've said, a lot of JackJumper supporters will be following today's show. And if you haven't already, go and check out the Tasmanian Takeover. The boys are doing an exceptional amount of work. JD, on the screens, behind the scenes, everything going on. He's been absolutely amazing. You've got video now on there, JD. You've got guests coming on left, right and centre. You're interviewing people. I don't know what's going on. Everything's happening for the Tasmanian Takeover. And it's an exciting time of the year, obviously, as I'm looking forward to seeing where you guys turn this podcast into. Basketball's done to a certain degree, but I know the Tasmanian Takeover won't sleep with yourself and Birdo, mate. But have you got any last-minute shout-outs? And obviously, a little bit of a send-off for the fans listening at home as well.
No, that's the big one. We've had some really cool interviews with guys from the Hobart Chargers and the Northwest Thunder. So if you want to sort of keep tabs on the JackJumpers in the NBL one, keep tuning into the Tassie Takeover, and hopefully we keep building those numbers to the point where we're going to start having some JackJumpers on, which would be really 100%. Cool.
No, definitely, mate. And you got any more comedy shows coming up, or what do we got any coming up in the comedy scene?
Nah, nothing for now. I've sort of been focusing on the podcasts for a little bit, and just having a bit of a rest after a big Fringe festival. But we'll start to ramp up the comedy in the second half of the year. So if you're in Perth, get into the comedy clubs and come and see me make an idiot of myself on stage.
No, definitely, mate. Well, listeners, that's going to wrap up, obviously, day 5 of the NBL Free Agency Fix. We'll be back on Monday with day number 6. I've got some exciting guests over the weekend coming up and plenty more coming down in the Free Agency Fix presented by the Basketball Fix. But until next time, we hope you've gotten your basketball fix.